my sexuality.
It made you feel uncomfortable.
I'm a very broken man right now.
You didn't apologize.
Hard for me.
I hate you!
Did you miss us?
Hey everyone, it's Anthony Allen Ramos. Okay, 22 years ago, Danny Roberts became a household name after appearing on The Real World New Orleans. He became one of the most famous gay people that America kind of fell in love with, wanted to get to know. All of that happened. And of course, you'll remember his relationship during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era. Well, listen, everyone, Danny is coming back with his fellow housemates on The Real World Homecoming New Orleans, which is going to be available to stream on Paramount Plus starting April 20th. And I'm so excited to be catching up with Danny right now. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. All right, let me tell you, it is so like surreal to be chatting with you because I remember, I mean, everyone probably says this to you, but I remember watching like your every move on that show. And it was just such a moment in time. And I was, you know, closeted myself, young, and then to see your story, you know, it's like, it's crazy. But, and I've been lucky to see the first couple episodes and it just kicks right back in from the get-go. So, I mean, how are you feeling to be back, going back into a time in your life that was obviously super important, but a lot happened with your relationship and just being thrust into the spotlight? What has it been like to kind of relive this all over again?
Well, a lot has happened in these 22 years. A lot. A handful of lives have happened in these 22 years. Yeah, I've talked about this a few times today with others, but you know, at this stage in life, it was probably the last thing on the radar expected to happen. I think for all of us, it was a really special moment in time that had happened for us, but we had all neatly tucked away and sort of maybe purposely forgotten about, moved on in life. Most of us hadn't been in touch with each other for that entire period. I think it was something that, at least I can speak for myself, was very apprehensive to go back and relive. It was a very different period in my life, and amazing in some ways, but very difficult in some ways too. So I think I had a lot of apprehension to go back to that period and open up that can of worms. But you know, it's very fair to say I'm very happy that I took the chance to do it. It actually ended up being a bit of a gift in a lot of ways.
I remember like in 2000, like you, after the show, you were on magazine covers, so many covers. I mean, you were on every like red carpet, I mean, you really became like one of the most like famous gay people. And you said, you know, you were such an introvert, and to have that pressure to kind of just be like, you know, the face of like this movement. What was it like for you to have all of that happen to you when you were like literally in your early 20s?
Yeah, from the outside perspective at the time, I don't think this was so obvious, but the truth was, you know, I had just come out myself. In fact, being on this show was a huge catalyst for me to fully come out to my family and a lot of people around me. So I was not comfortable with that fact at all. It was a very different era where it wasn't safe or generally okay to be out, especially outside of any big city. It was just not non-starter. A year after Matthew Shepard. Kind of hard to imagine now, but it was a very different time. A lot has changed in those 20 plus years. But I think a lot was left hanging from that time period in our lives. And it was kind of nice to go back and revisit some of those things and actually get closure. A big part of that, the white elephant in the room, was my ex at the time that I had a long relationship with for nearly 10 years. You know, after we filmed the show, he carried on in the military. We lived a very underground life together for years before he finally got out. And that relationship, you know, the universe was against it from the start. So it imploded in quite a dramatic fashion and didn't end on a good note. We just lost complete touch with each other for a good 15 years. And that never felt right. And it was actually nice to go back and have closure with that chapter of my life, because it was not just the relationship by any means, but the whole context around the relationship was very complicated. And something that I just wasn't prepared to actually cope with at that stage of my life. 22-year-old clueless thing from Georgia.
Yeah, and of course, you're talking about Paul, who, if anyone has not seen the original, I remember that so specifically. Like, he was in the military, obviously, during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell time, and he wanted to come and see you while you were filming, and that meant that his face had to be blurred the entire time that he was there. It sounds like that this is definitely going to be covered, kind of, kind of a cathartic experience for you. What can you tell me about, like, I mean, I would love to know if Paul's going to pop in. Like, I just, I think so many of us wanted to know, like, what happened, and like, but I'm happy to hear that it sounds like you're going to be able to get, some closure on it all.
I don't know if what I'm allowed to reveal at this point, especially because I haven't seen any of the edited version. But yes, it was definitely an important chapter or part of my life story at the time. It became a pivotal part of the show at the time, which was very unexpected. When I agreed to do the show originally, we weren't even a couple yet. We met after being cast and then became a relationship through the whole experience. But yes, this chapter of the story definitely revisits that chapter.
Well, we will definitely be tuning in. You mentioned so many lives that you've had since, in these 22 years. And I want to talk about something that was very important to you in 2018. You decided to publicly come out as HIV positive. And I think that it's so important. At GLAAD, we are doing so much work to really erase and change stigma when it comes to people living with HIV, with you equals you. And I would love to know for you why, thinking back on that moment in 2018, why you decided to really go public with it and to kind of just, make that decision to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad you brought this topic up. And this is such an interesting period around the topic of HIV. It's kind of a dichotomy of existence and awareness around what it means to be HIV positive today. There are many, many, many people out there who still carry really negative bias towards it, very negative viewpoints, have a lot of, there's a lot of judgment around the topic. Even though on a practical level, it's a virus, it's an illness, no different than COVID. This is a very interesting era to talk about a virus and how a virus can become loaded with moral baggage and people's biases as well. When I grew up in the 1890s, in the 90s, it was a horrible stigma around it, and you died from it. There was no treatment. Later in time, towards sort of, around the time of late 90s, there were new drugs coming together that sort of could prolong your life in maybe not so great ways, but at least prolong your life. So 20 years medicine has advanced so much. Well, when I was diagnosed with HIV, because I had grown up in the 90s, I was very, very paranoid. I was a hypochondriac. In fact, I think I can look back, it probably delayed my coming out. It delayed me dating men when I was younger because I was so afraid of HIV. And most of us were at that time. We were terrified of it. And when I found out, it was very unexpected. There I was in my mid-30s. Talk about something you don't expect in later in life. This was it. Came across it in routine blood and health checkup, just came out of nowhere. And it was devastating. I went through a grieving period, grieving, a former healthy version of myself. There's a weight that comes with it in our society because you are suddenly beholden to our fucked up healthcare system. Pardon my French. You mourn a sense of loss of freedom with that alone, because your life does become entirely dependent on medicine and access to this medicine. And this access is not widely available out there still today. Anyhow, I went on a long journey with that, you know, moving, and it was very much like my second coming out through the same sort of guilt, shame, overcoming those biases, unloading the baggage that you have carried in your own mind around the topic. Part of the most difficult part of that journey was accepting the biases that I held deep in my own psyche towards people who were HIV positive, and having to confront that and let that go. I think this is a lot of what anyone who finds out they're positive goes through. They are the stages of grief, and then you come to the other end of that, come out of a dark tunnel, and you know, you find the strength to own it and be okay about it and see it for what actually the practical fact it is. It's a virus. Nature's trying to kill us all the time. This is another way nature's trying to kill us. So there was a freedom in getting to that point. That's when I started becoming public about it. But the main reason was I could not believe, even though I went through my own journey to come to this understanding, but it was really challenging to realize how much of the world, including gay men, still have enormous amounts of negative bias towards anyone who's positive. It still comes loaded with all sorts of judgment and preconceived notions. And I just thought, well, here's the next chapter in my life where the universe has presented a challenge to me that I want to own and be vocal about, so that hopefully other people live in a little less pain. And thank God we live in this time of medicine. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you talking to you right now. I'd probably be dead. It's been a few years. I recovered. It was a long journey. And there are millions upon millions of people on this planet who are positive. But it is, you know, it's something that always weighs in the back of your mind. It's always there. Facing mortality is a heavy, heavy moment in life that I don't know if any of us are ever quite ready for when it happens.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, thank you first off for sharing all of that. And I think it's so key to remind people that, you know, it's no longer a death sentence. You can be completely fine and live, you know, very successful lives. And I think at GLAAD, we always say that that's so important that in media we see that. And I'm really hoping that people, you know, that turn on this reunion of sorts, you know, see you and know your story, and, you know, see that you're doing great, and, you know, you're living a happy, successful life. Is it something that you were able to kind of, you know, thinking back 22 years later, you haven't seen some of these people in 22 years. Did you get to have conversations about, you know, your journey and wanting to talk about being HIV positive with any of the other housemates?
Yes, and by the way, thanks for reminding me, because I forget now that a lot of people still, you know, the majority of the population does not understand that if you're HIV positive and you're treated, well, you essentially cannot transmit the virus. A big part of what motivated me to be confident in being public about this a few years ago is the fact that scientists had just gotten to a point of confidence in actually publicly stating that declaration. So that gave me a lot of confidence, and it gave me a sort of a driver to want to help other people understand that fact. And I don't think the majority of the population understands that. And a big driver for me, again, being okay with coming back to do this again, was to actually share this. It's terrifying when you find out. It's, you know, something that no one wants to hear. I think your mind immediately goes to the darkest recesses and thinks about the worst outcomes. But it is, again, it's amazing where we are with medicine today. We're now to a point where you don't have to take I know I only take one pill a day, but you can now actually just get a shot every couple of months and live a completely more or less healthy life. It's amazing. And at some point there will be a cure.
Yeah, and I think that's what and it's so important that we, like you said, there is so much misinformation. We've done studies at GLAAD with Gilead about just the state of stigma and how so many people still think crazy things that are not accurate. So I think with media specifically, people on TV, it's important that the world sees the success and people thriving and living with it. But thinking back, jumping back to the show, was the experience
Way to put it.
what you thought it was going to be? Do you have any regrets with it, or was it? I mean, because you stayed pretty close with Kelly, I think, right?
Yeah, Kelly and I had remained close, and I had remained in touch with Melissa on and off over the years, but that was it. I had lost touch with all of the rest of them, and vice versa. And no, there's nothing I regret. I had one clear intention of doing this, and I feel like I succeeded. My main goal in coming back was actually to address the topic of our religious and spiritual beliefs in our lives and how that makes a really negative impact on a lot of people in this world. It's part of my own personal story. Grew up in the Deep South. A lot of people's views haven't changed whatsoever. And I really wanted to come back and address that topic, especially in the era that we're in right now, where we're going in reverse in many ways.
I know, and I mean, you mentioned the South, and I think about this moment that we're in where so many states across the country are limiting LGBTQ rights again, especially for trans people and trans youth. I mean, it's a scary time.
Yeah, it is. A lot of things that were common in the 90s, but we all kind of get comfortable thinking that we were beyond now, which maybe now feels a bit naive and silly to think we were there, but we're not. A lot of the same scapegoats are coming back out, and it's disappointing to see it happening too.
Yeah, could not agree more. But
I know I'm speaking to the choir.
I know, right? No, it's tough, but I appreciate you, sharing that. And I mean, I gotta say though, just on a lighter note, the show is, it picks right back up. It is so entertaining. I finished 2 episodes. I was like, where's the next one? I'm ready. So everyone, I want to. Yeah, exactly.
We can all sit down and screen one right now.
Exactly. But it's been so cool to catch up with you. Congrats on everything. What is next now? I mean, I know everyone loves to be like, what's next? And you're like, I'm still doing this thing, but what do you want to do next?
Trying to keep up with today. Well, I have a 6-year-old daughter these days, so that's always next on my plate. I am actually looking really forward to taking a bit of a hiatus from work and everything this summer and spending a lot of special time with her.
Good.
And a pretty intense few years here.
Yeah, no, you deserve it.
But I think we all do.
Yeah, exactly. Just a reminder, everyone, The Real World Homecoming New Orleans will be available to stream on Paramount Plus starting April 20th.